And here it begins, folks. It's my time again with the president, Lawrence Gervais. Folks, I'm Ross Memphis Pambrun. Thank you for joining us on the Squeaky Wheel. And Lawrence, let's dive right into it. This happens to be Olympic time. We're in Beijing. You know, there's a lot of controversy, but let's jump into some of the fun things and some of the things that you and I have talked about recently that I find almost mind-boggling. Actually, and you brought this up, that the Canadian women's team, who's doing fabulous right now, have two Métis players. And let's talk about CBC and their decisions.
Yeah, I mean, no real coverage there. I mean, there's coverage everywhere else. It's on Facebook. It's, pretty much coming from their mouths. But, certainly when they say, Indigenous North American player, they identify the U.S. Ojibwe player from Sault Ste. Marie, which is great. But where the Métis? You have two players that already are on the team playing for Team Canada. And it's not their first time either. So, yeah, it's very interesting.
I like to think that, CBC does some of their background work. And my hope here is that they've done some of the interview work and we just haven't seen it yet. But right now, we've all been watching. Yes, she's a fabulous American hockey player, First Nations, and she's the first on an American team. And that's great that we're celebrating that. But where is all of the connection with our team and bringing that celebration of women's, fantastic women's hockey, and saying as well, let's celebrate this. We have two Métis people. And maybe that's not their priority. And I'm hoping that we're not, putting too unnecessary attention on these two players if that's not the message they want to serve. But usually that information gets out there, and we're here to support you and we're here behind you, and you are the team, right? All of the members of that women's team, they are the team. And I like that, generally we celebrate the diversity that's, within a team like that. And as a team, I'm hoping Canada, is built on the strength of their skills. And that just comes from the people who are carrying the torch.
Well, I mean, for me, it's all about, creating role models in our community and making sure that they're visible, number one. And that's part of, I think Canada's role, and certainly CBC's role, because they are Canada's broadcasting corporation, to really understand that if you want true reconciliation with Indigenous groups, not just focus just on, one sector. There's First Nations, Métis, and Inuit are all Indigenous in this country, and there's no hierarchy, so, certainly, and I look to the families and I look to the younger people that are watching the Olympics, and, these, the participants, are solid, have trained, and they've done what they need to do every 4 years to get there. And now's the time when they're on the world stage to actually send a message that, they're being acknowledged by Canadian citizens, or that this CBC that's set up here. Because, we always have to look to the families and all the sacrifices they've done, and, recognizing their certainly Indigenous heritage and celebrating it. And that transfers to those younger generation that are coming forward. So, we can look that we can achieve an Olympic status as, Métis young athletes. They can certainly have something, goals to work towards. And, this is all part of it.
No, absolutely. No doubt. And, the two gals, which would probably be an offensive term on our team, Jocelyn Larocque and Jamie Lee Rattray, both of the Métis Nation.
Yeah.
So, we're celebrated, we're excited, we know your commitment to the sport, and anybody who's made it to that level, do everything in your power to enjoy the experience. And, as CBC and as, new experiences are happening, Olympic hockey coverage now is being carried in the language of Inuktitut, I think I said that probably wrong as I normally do, and Eastern Cree, which I think is traditionally a bit more of these are Quebec dialects of Indigenous language, deep out east. But that's so fabulous, that we're creating that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Eastern Cree is probably closer to Manitoba or those areas, right? But but I just want to make sure that our Métis athletes are being recognized properly and certainly created as role models in our community. And that's would leave huge impacts for us. But that's all. But we celebrate them for sure. We wish them all the luck. And if they achieve the gold, fantastic.
Hey, they've achieved, again, a goal that I think any player has done by just making it to that level. And again, I think you're absolutely right, Lawrence. And that's part of the reason we're here on the Squeaky Wheel, is to create that awareness, a little bit of that connection. It's not about controversy. I mean, we're not trying to be, well, not that Whoopi Goldberg was necessarily trying, I don't think, to be put herself in a challenging situation with the Jewish community and her comment about race. Same as, Joe Rogan talks a lot. And, he's found himself in a lot of hot water due to the nature of some of the cultural references that he's made, much less the relationship he has with the somewhat anti-vax community, or his conversation that seems to really focus from the side of, personal decisions and anti-vaxxing. And now a lot of his Spotify episodes are being pulled. Whoopi Goldberg is being suspended. We're trying to just say, let's find those people within and celebrate them. And again, I know you and everybody hopes that our team can bring home the gold, but I'm just happy to see that representation is there and that they've made it that far. So there's a thumbs up to all those hockey players over there. And right now, the women's team is just playing fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the next games here is against the U.S. It's going to be a big game, and see how that goes. And they're missing one key player in the U.S. squad, but certainly, I think we have better chances this year, and we'll get there.
It'll be a battle. Well, and here, our mixed curling team of Morris and Holman. Again, big shout out to all of our athletes. And sadly, or unfortunately, they just lost to Australia, the worst other curling team. And one person had mentioned to me recently that Morris actually was one of the instructors for that Australia team, or coached them. And, when you're up against the student and the teacher and you get to win, it's an all-out match. And sadly, we lost that game. But that doesn't mean that we're not, going to be climbing to the next level as they move through the curling tournament over at the Olympics. But there's a lot of curling left to happen. And it's, again, another one of those national sports. And I think you commented before, you've actually thrown a few rocks. I've only been on outdoor rinks where you're essentially holding pails of cement with like a ice cream handle stuffed into it to try and throw for the circle. I've never thrown a really, really good Saskatchewan rock.
Well, I mean, I was raised in Prince George, and that's a big curling capital up there. And, a lot of Team Canada, well, at that time when I was growing up, it was very, very, it was intermingled with all of us, even as we had PE as students in high school when we go to the curling rink, right? And I'm sure the old people would look at us really funny because they would always thought we were messing with their ice and, all perturbed and stuff. And I could see why, because we're all a bunch of high school idiots, on their nicely manicured ice and throwing these boulders down and trying not to hit the hack and take them out and stuff. Or we'd be sweeping our feet under us and just doing stupid things. But it was always a blast to be curling in Prince George.
I would love to have the opportunity to throw rocks either on your team or against you, Lawrence. So as soon as anybody creates that opportunity, I know we're going to be out there.
This episode brought to you by the Métis Nation of Alberta, with a vision of a strong Métis Nation embracing Métis rights, and a mission to pursue the advancement of the socioeconomic and cultural well-being of the Métis people of Alberta. For more information, go to www.albertamétis.com. Now, back to the show.
First Nations are leading a bid with the Canadian Olympic Committee to try and bring the Olympics back to Canada in 2030. So kind of an interesting approach that we consider it First Nations led. And so it's being endorsed, and as well, it's being endorsed by the mayors of Vancouver and Whistler. And, I get into this conversation a lot, and I don't know if this happens to you, Lawrence, and it does happen obviously more around the time when the major international sporting events are occurring. But a lot of people say, well, it's just a waste of money. And it's, you develop this infrastructure and all of a sudden it's wasted and it's never utilized. But I've had a few people that I've worked with, these younger fellas, come up and say, well, they were only born in the 80s and or such. They never have had the opportunity to attend an Olympics. They've always been too young, and I hadn't really thought of it that way. You know, Canada hasn't had a Summer Olympics in such a long time. Maybe there is an opportunity to create this celebration, but maybe we have to be a bit more fiscally responsible. I don't understand why we can't utilize a lot of the resources and the infrastructure that's already in place. In the past, it seemed like if you bring the Olympics, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to spend $100 billion. Well, why? Why can't it just be a place where we come to celebrate and gather and create competition?
Well, unfortunately, it's not up to us as a bidder on the Olympics. We have to certainly adhere to the Olympic standard, and that's where the cost comes from. It doesn't come from us. We just, we make the money to build the thing, and they certainly set the standard, and that's where Hairline is where all the money gets spent, right? And certainly when you're bidding on the Olympics, you got to spend money to be at the table too. So that's also a part of it. In terms of what's very unique about that statement about Vancouver was I was there when the Olympic bid was going through Vancouver, the first one in 2010, right? And I remember the resentment towards the Olympics coming from the Aboriginal community over there. So it's kind of flip-flopped a little bit. Now you got supporters that are coming. But of course, when I worked in the downtown east side, we were kind of worried about all the implications it would have in that community, that specific neighborhood, because being right beside most of the venues, and you got one of the poorest postal codes in North America sitting right there, well, then you're going to have a lot of effects in that neighborhood, right? So there was a lot of fear and a lot of resentment towards the IOC when that bid was going through. And I was part of those heated arguments.
Actually, that's interesting. That's a good point. When you're not brought to the table, like back then, if the First Nation communities and the Indigenous communities weren't brought to the table, yeah, how do you find the energy to support it? But now when it becomes a shared initiative, boy, does seem as though more people are stepping up to say, yes, I'm interested in figuring out a way to create this opportunity. And it's an opportunity for our athletes, right? To showcase both our homes and the skill and the sport that we are bringing to from our communities. Yeah, I think that'd be kind of an exciting time. Well, let's jump on a little bit, Lawrence, from some of the things that are happening on the other side of the world in China, and let's talk a little bit about what's happening locally here. You recently had a meeting with the mayor.
Yeah, I had a nice sit down at the Lougheed House with Mayor Gondek, and we discussed some of the past, what their certainly requests have been made in the past for Region 3, and that was acknowledged, and some of the future endeavors we think we'll probably end up working together with. So, we're very excited to work with the city and certainly be at the table now that we can discuss these certain long objectives that we've had in the past and we'll try to move forward. But I mean, we've had, a simple impact so far, with Métis Trail here and being Calgary but there are certain things that were left over on that. So, just little specific items that, I think we can, certainly achieve very quickly.
I know a lot of our listeners and anybody who follows us on LinkedIn has seen the picture of you and I with the mayor when we were doing a flag raising during Métis Week. Did she ask about me? I think that's what a lot of our listeners are interested in. Did she say, where's that real handsome other friend of yours?
No, I think it was all about removing some fire captain that worked in the Calgary Fire Department. He was pretty lax on the job for the last year. So
he's been pretty lax. Yeah, exactly. Well, then I'm going to have a talk with her, because if she wasn't going out of her way to say, yeah, where's that guy? Where's that sash really well? I need to find a more slimming sash. When I look sometimes at the pictures, I always find it kind of widens me out. So folks, if any of you out there have any good ideas on how to make those sashes a little bit more slimming, this is not vanity, but those sashes in that camera does seem to add 10 pounds. Well, to you, it looks like it adds more like 20, but.
Well, I think it was the vaccine that made me fat. Don't tell anybody. That could be a side effect. I could be spreading misinformation, but.
Yeah, that's right. You could be spreading misinformation, but yes, I like to think that that's the excuse that I'm going to use. A real nice positive thing too. And there's another question I want to jump back onto about the region, but I was recently reading, but she was a Manitoba Métis beader. Her name is Jessie Pruden, and she'd injured herself a couple of years ago, but she taught herself to bead. Well, you know, when you put that time and that effort in, she had 2 good solid years to work her way through it. Her art, as it were, and her designs have been picked up by a New York retailer called Flying Solo. And they've offered her a spot to come to Paris Fashion Week in order to, you know, celebrate, share her wares, connect with them. So from, as she points out, from her living room to Paris in 2 years. I looked at a lot of her art, and I know, Lawrence, you have a lot of experience with you know, the awareness of beading, and we've been provided a number of nice pieces. She does a lot of earring and such bead work. But boy, we have a lot of talent within our community. And does a lot of that come from the elders, or is there a lot of availability for the youth to just pick up that skill?
Oh yeah, it's definitely, a lot of it does come from the elders at the beginning, and she probably has a really good teacher and to be at that level. And some of us, you know, I can't bead for more than 5 minutes because it starts to hurt my thumb and my fingers, right? So, but no, it definitely, it's that to be able to create a pattern in your mind and be able to put that on, you know, a fabric and actually start beading it. That's a process that don't have the patience for, but you know, for some it's how they relieve stress and all those good things. And obviously she found her niche.
Yeah. And you know what? That's a good point. We're always looking at it sometimes from the artistic point of it, but a lot of times just the mental health of the patients of doing this sort of a relaxing, repetitive rhythm and then coming up with a design. I'm sure is there, folks, if this hasn't been out there yet and it is a new idea, we want 50% of the stake, but is there a bead by numbers? You know, there's paint by numbers. Lawrence, if somebody comes up with this idea, we got to get our hand in the pie there. Yeah, if you like that, send us a sample, folks, and we'll try and put it up here on the Squeaky Wheel, bead by numbers. Maybe that'd be a great way to create that opportunity for our youth in order to practice.
Yeah, I mean, beading is one of those art forms that you really, I mean, in the old days, it was predominantly what you did and because you had the time for it. Nowadays, you got so many other distractions that take you away from your beadwork. It's pretty hard to master, right? But, you know.
If any of our beaders are listening out there, I would love for somebody to come up with the Memphis Group as a little beaded lapel pin that I could wear. So if any of you are listening and you decide you want to tackle that project, make sure you reach out to us, Ross at thesqueakywheel.ca. I'd love to get that email. Also happening regionally, Lawrence, I just saw the other day, our new newsletter is out.
Yes. So we actually got a younger person to come and develop a newsletter for us. We're very excited about it. I think this is our 4th edition. We've never really done it before. I used to run an e-zine with a bunch of Aboriginal youth in Vancouver. It was I loved that experience, but it's been a long time since I actually looked at a newsletter and started editing it, every word and all that stuff. But I think if everybody wants to see it, it's on Facebook, our Metis Nation of Alberta Region 3 page. Just take a look and kind of see the format and the template that we came up with. And yeah, we're very excited that it'll be a monthly newsletter and, you know, advising our community of all the things that are happening. Unfortunately, because of the restrictions, it's really hard for us to have a very large annual general meeting to actually give a report. So this kind of breaks away a little bit from that. And so people can actually see what the office is doing and be able to check in to see all the programs and all the events and all the opportunities for them.
Well, and again, I think, you know, it's nice to have one more touch point. Right now, social media often is just one thing at a time. Well, I'm going to send this one piece of information along, this one piece of information. You know, the province does a nice job of a newsletter, and I'm happy to hear that we're starting to develop one more of those touch points that you get a chance to look at a page or, 2 pages of information that are carrying, a bit more awareness of your community. And that's something that's easier to share along, is to fire off this newsletter to the next, to your family, friends, and to your group. And there's also supplies now that are available.
Oh, yes. So we got some COVID tests that are available. We are giving them to certainly the families that have school-age children, that's what our focus is right now, because they probably need the test in case their kid comes home coughing or whatever. We just want to make sure that they're not sending them to school, and certainly have a home test for them. It's vital right now, I think.
Yeah, so we need to pay attention, make sure that we connect with our communities when it comes to that. And Lawrence, another thing that's really exciting that's happening, and actually I apologize, the term exciting is not right, but Anderson Cooper has come to Canada with 60 Minutes. And how do we feel about that awareness, that American awareness regarding residential schools? You know, where do we get to be a part of that conversation?
Well, I think it is important for at least worldwide, that the awareness is there. It's, they are our neighbors to the south. You can't get a farther reach than 60 Minutes in terms of like a real good documentary that, and what they cover. But I know Anderson Cooper was at Cowessess First Nation to look at the grave sites and those things, or at least look at the data or visit that area. So, I think moving ahead is just creating that awareness. Canada certainly has a responsibility to, react to these grave sites and what's happening. And they're injecting money into more of the research or the search for them. And certainly the churches are moving along too. And it's just, we have to get closer to that healing and understanding. And this is only just a handful of communities too. There's going to be plenty more that are going to be coming, and we just have to be ready for that as Canadian citizens, and understand the real goings on and what happened and the truth, and just be ready for it.
Well, and when I get into those conversations with people, again, my awareness and the knowledge of residential schools and the church's role and the connection with colonialism and where this development had occurred, the loss of these, and the effect on the families and the loss of these children, we can't lose sight of that. But we need to respect the fact that this loss, this challenge, is connecting us as a community, is creating that awareness, and we need to ensure we don't stop the conversation. Too often, once the conversation's had, well, we move on and go, well, history was in the past. Yeah, but this history, has extended through community and family now for a long time. And there's still a lot of questions that have to happen at the municipal, the provincial, the federal, the international, and the religious levels of where is the information so that families can heal. This is right. Loss.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think for me, the most important goal is letting the families heal and know the actual story that went on with them, or whatever they can cover or get. They didn't keep a lot of good, tangible records, unfortunately. So nobody really knows even what they passed away of, so that's certainly, what the churches have, and, what they can release, and with the government, what they have in their documents too, that needs to come to light. And certainly, us as a community, like if it's in my family, if there are a few connections that I have in my family with residential schools. So, even our families need to know what's going on as Métis. And that's the other layer is, the Métis recognition in all this, because there's, we were left out of the original allotment for a residential school. But there are Métis that were there. So, all that stuff has to be sort of looked at too.
Well, and one of the things that I come across is that our communities want to talk about residential schools. They want to have an understanding. But from the elders, one thing I think that maybe the church is missing is that a lot of these elders were very involved in the religious aspect and continue to be, but they're at a crossroads because the church is doing nothing to answer to, this tragedy. And yet the church has provided them with so much faith. How do they reconnect? And I think that the church has to step up more and take a larger role.
Yeah.
And then trying to heal and reconnect.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, we always look at the church and the government. They all have a role in this, and they need to understand it and move forward. And the only way to reconciliation is for them to actually give up those sources of information. I think that's very vital to these communities.
Yeah. And now let's jump into a little conversation. Something I was reading recently was the active grandparent hypothesis. And what that means is, in order to keep our seniors and our elders at the strongest mentally that they can be, having them continue to connect within our families and within our communities. And I think that's something as one of the strengths of the Métis community, is continuing to bridge that relationship so that the youth know that an elder is somebody you can turn to as a knowledge user and is shared. They don't just become those grandparents that are washed away that you try and, hide away. No, I think the Métis community does a good job.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have recognition of, elders that kind of know the role, know they're the support system. They're not there to kind of take either side and take, a political perspective, because that's really not their role. They will sit as an advisor, but they also have that spiritual sense to them too. So if you need to, reconnect every once in a while, they're there, and you might have to go to a ceremony. You might not, but it's certainly somebody that can give you a little bit of a talk and that you trust. I mean, that's part of it too. But knowledge keepers are a little bit, or knowledge holders, whatever you want to use, are just a little bit different. They're kind of in between. They're the ones that, out of practical experience, like a business person or somebody that you can relate to, that you're a business owner and you need to go to them for advice. That's sort of that knowledge holder aspect, right? They may not have that spiritual sense or that sort of thing. And, there's a certain category for that too. And I feel bad categorizing this, but certainly I was kind of raised in a way that through ceremony and all that stuff, those are the ones that are the real, true sort of elders. And they're the ones that kind of hold the ceremonies and all those things together as a community. And those are the people we go to for faith building. Then the knowledge holders are the advisors in our community, the ones who've been there. Those are the ones you want to go to. And then, of course, we have our senior population. They're the ones that, we need to take care of as a community, because they're either 55 plus and they're needing something, and vital, and we can actually be there for them.
So then you're much closer to being a elder than I am. So yeah, I've got years to go before I have to worry about that. But speaking of elders, Lawrence, Leighton said send the signal out. It is scam time. Now, going back to the seniors and our elders, folks, right now, that's happening more a little bit into BC, but it's starting to inch its way across Canada, is this fraud that's occurring in the world of COVID testing. So the Better Business Bureau is warning that people are calling around and they're trying to set you up with a fake COVID testing requirement. And again, I've said it many, many times, and I will continue to say it, knowledge is power. And folks, when you give away personal information, whether they're asking you for your first name, maybe your maiden name, if they're asking you for your date of birth and they're trying to set you up, they might not be asking right off the bat for a credit card, but they may be saying, well, if I knew what year you were born, this will make it easier for the testing purposes. When you give them away that information, you're providing somebody, a threat actor, with the opportunity to go out and try and figure out how to scam you. I've said it many, many times. Your passwords should be relatively complicated. And I could talk more about that on another episode. But folks, the more information you give, the more at risk you are. So make sure that if you are concerned, tell them, I'm going to hang up right now. I'll call the police and ask them if this seems reasonable. And if it is, I'll call you back. But generally, that's not the way it's going to happen. Lawrence, We're running out of time. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts regarding any concerns that you may be happening with the scams that are going on. And is Tom Cruise too short to be Jack Reacher?
Well, what I suggest is like that flamethrower thing I said last time, your doorbell.
Yeah.
Right? If they come to your door, that's what you push. And Far Reacher, or was it Jack Reacher for Tom Cruise? I think he reaches for everything, because isn't he quite short?
He is quite short, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe the name suits him. I don't know, because Jack will be reaching, I guess. So
True, he's going to have a hard time getting the peanut butter if it's on the top shelf. But I think from what I understand is because, he was based on the books, Jack Reacher was quite a big, tall, burly, fella, and Tom Cruise. But, is there anything that Tom Cruise isn't good in? Well, except for maybe Scientology. But anything he acts in, boy, that guy is a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Cruise has been around since we were kids, and what is he, like 70 or 80 now? So
I think, he's like 85.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is a bit of a reach for him to actually look at, like, he's like in his prime and 20s and his 30s, but can we find a different actor? I mean, isn't there plenty of pool out there that certainly around that age group and height?
Folks, if any of you right now are looking to try and get good actors, I consider us. Lawrence and I are more of a duo actor, but perhaps you and I could take on a Mission Impossible role, as we have on our podcast, which is essentially Métis Conversation Mission Impossible is what we've done here. So folks, our time has come to an end here for this week on the Squeaky Wheel. I cannot say thank you enough. You're always able to reach out to us, ross@thesqueakywheel.ca or lawrence@thesqueakywheel.ca. I know Leighton will throw more information up that you can find on how to connect with us. Thank you to our team. I cannot say thank you enough, again, to the Métis Nation of Alberta and their support for our conversation, as well as all of our listeners, all of our friends, all of our elders, and Mother Earth for her spirit and her guidance. Thank you for connecting with us, and we look forward to seeing you folks on our next episode. Keep the wheel squeaking. The Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, from M&A Region 3, and the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.